The world of performance cars is predictable on some fronts. Every new sports car that comes out is almost always more powerful than the car it replaces. And it's a little bit quicker, a little bit faster than most of its natural rivals. And when you're talking about brands like Porsche, it's not only about pounding more power under that hood, it's also about millimeter perfect dynamics, faster corner speeds, quicker lap times. Now that is a difficult feat to achieve with the sports car itself. And the calculations become all the more difficult when you raise that ground clearance, raise the center of gravity and build an SUV. Porsche did take up that challenge and delivered a hard-hitting punch with the Cayenne. But back then, probably setting that benchmark would have been easier with no rivals around. But in today's world, where the likes of Range Rover, Maserati, Bentley and even Lamborghini are building sports car rivaling SUVs, things do get serious, very serious. More serious than the 550 horses under that hood. Yes, 550 PS. All the engines in the new Cayenne are now turbocharged, but it is this level of power that awards this Cayenne the iconic turbo badge on the tailgate. The tailgate, with its seamless lighting strip, is also the easiest way to identify the new Cayenne from the older one. Look closely and you will realize that it's also leaner and has tighter lines. The familiar looking bodywork has a multi-material construction, out of which 47% is aluminium, making this car about 55 to 65 kilos lighter than before. Porsche assures that despite the focus on weight loss, steel has been used generously in the impact zones to ensure optimum safety of the passenger cell. The new chassis also responds better than before to flex, G-forces and thermal effects. A very important aspect of the new chassis and the new platform is the 48-volt subsystem, which is used to power the active anti-roll bars. The system can adjust the torsional rigidity of the anti-roll bars within seconds. A pivotal motor splits the anti-roll bar into two halves and can rotate them in opposite directions to counter roll or dive. Compared to the electro-hydraulic actuators on the outgoing model, this system is so quick in its operation that it makes the passenger cell feel independent of the suspension elements. Chuck the Cayenne into a bend or a series of bends and the coordination between your senses will go for a toss. Your experienced grey matter will tell you that there needs to be vertical movement and your eyes and your organs are already preparing for it. Interestingly, the Cayenne is preparing too, just that the car's reflexes are much faster than human reflexes. So while the 3-chamber air suspension is doing its thing, the cabin stays parallel to the ground. Remember, we are talking about sports car levels of speed here. The air suspension is actually quite good even on mediocre road surfaces, and you don't get that overly firm ride that you usually get from performance cars from this segment. You can also set up the stiffness levels of the suspension to your liking, and when the going gets even tougher, you have an array of off-road driving modes to choose from. The system lets you pick your choice of terrain, and it will also let you alter the ride height. It has two lockable differentials. With my experience during a trip to some rocky hills of Oman with the Cayenne S, I can tell you that this system delivers on what it promises, and then some. You have all the hardware that you need to go off the beaten path, but you will have to swap the tires, get something that is more off-road biased. By default, the Cayenne Turbo comes with the road biased tires, but not just any tires. This is Pirelli's top drawer equipment, the P0. It is arguably the stickiest selection of tires for road-going performance cars. You just can't buy them off the shelf by specifying the size. Every Pirelli P0 tire is tailor-made as per the dynamic requirement of every model, and therefore its contribution to the car's handling characteristics is much higher than any generic performance tire. Complementing these is Porsche's 4-wheel steering concept, which was a delight on the 911 GT3 and magical on the Cayenne. Magical for the way it masks the size of this SUV by way of a tighter turning radius at slower speeds or sharper handling when you push the car around bends. The Cayenne Turbo also gets the Porsche surface-coated brakes, which use a cast iron disc coated with exceptionally hard tungsten carbide. These are mated to a 10-piston caliper at the front and a 4-piston caliper at the rear. These brakes boast of better friction, faster response, a slower wear, and lesser brake dust. The slower wear translates to a 30% longer service life, and the lesser brake dust means that it's eco-friendlier. Now, these brakes do need a firm push for their optimal operation, but speaking of optimal operation, they don't need to come up to heat like the carbon ceramic brakes. Now, couple these brakes with the four-wheel steering, the anti-roll bars, the grip from the tires, and you have a package that, quite frankly, needs getting used to. But once you do, you realize that the handling dynamics of this car raise the bar to a whole new level. To that effect, the Cayenne Turbo also gets new active aerodynamics, which have active flaps up front for lowering the drag or for improving cooling, and the ability to lower the car at speed for better performance. But the star of the aero package is their roof-mounted active spoiler that can dynamically change its angle to increase downforce, aid stability, compensate for an open sunroof, or even aid braking by creating aerodynamic resistance. This Cayenne also trades in the conventional double wishbone axle for an aluminium front axle that features a separated link design. Further, an aluminium auxiliary frame replaces the steel subframe used for mounting the engine. The generous use of aluminium reduces weight, while this new design makes for a quicker steering response and minimizes vibrations caused by wheel imbalance. The steering is a little too light for my liking. I would have liked it to weigh up with speed, or at least weigh up when I dial in the Sport or the Sport Plus modes. And speaking of this dial, it not only summons various driving modes which will give you sharper throttle and gearbox responses, but it also has this little knob which, when pressed, acts like a boost function. It will give you a temporary dollop of power and torque for a brief 20 seconds. But it works so well, I call it the headbanger mode. I call it the headbanger switch. Oh, and talking of power and torque, we haven't spoken about the engine yet, have we? This engine is still a V8, but now a 4-litre bi-turbo unit. Puts out about 770 Newton meters of torque, 550 PS of power, and it goes, you just saw it, right? 0 to 100, 4.1 seconds. But very frankly, these numbers, this power, it's not what makes this car so special. Like I said right at the beginning, it's the sum of all the technologies that gives it this precise handling, the way it puts all these power down to the road, the way it makes all of it exciting. That is what makes this car what it is. That is what gives it the magical precision that you only expect from one brand, Porsche.